Yeah. Hi everyone. Welcome to Think and Grow Rich Daily Hangout. If you are watching live, although they were a bit late, so I don't, we don't have anyone watching right now. Um, then sorry about that. I had trouble getting onto the internet. It just wouldn't work at all. I managed to get everything set up, but then I couldn't post the information, and the Hangout dropped, and so I spent about 10 minutes trying to get the connection working. But anyway, that's a bit boring. We're here now. So, how are you doing, Glenn?
I'm doing fine. Good morning.
Cool. And we're reading from the lecture notes. Actually, something quite funny, Glenn. I was yesterday. I felt really urged to read more about how Napoleon Hill wrote his book
Yeah.
and to read more about his life. And I found a fascinating article
Oh,
about his life, which I hadn't read before. It was
oh,
really funny because it kind of it, he did loads of different things. I thought he had this kind of quite
well,
simple,
that would be a good thing to read someday too, Sandy, even on here, right? Just to kind of give
yeah,
a
get
little
some context.
background. I think
Yeah,
that'd be great.
exactly. I think I'll post it in the group as well because he basically just shows that he was a bit of a troublesome teen, and his mum died when he was young, as we know already, and then his dad remarried, and his stepmother became a really important person in his life.
Yeah.
She actually said to him, "Look, instead of getting into trouble, why don't you learn to write, and you shall become rich and famous." And she spent a lot of time with him, getting him to write and teaching him how to do it properly. And
Coach.
so he went off to become a journalist, and he interviewed Andrew Carnegie when Carnegie asked him to do the project, and then he was doing lots of different things. I mean, he owned a candy store. He offered his services to FDR during the First World War to help him write literature that would be getting people's minds off the war. And he did all kinds of things. And he set up a success school, and then he lost all his money in the depression. And he didn't actually. The thing I thought he had done was that he wanted to write a book from the very beginning. But in fact, in the beginning, it was more like research.
Yeah.
And there was someone else who said you should make a book out of it. And it
Oh,
was a true story about the noodle your boodle, because what it said in this article is that he had he had written a first book which had become successful. And what Andrew Carnegie said to him, actually, which I thought was interesting, was when he interviewed him, when Napoleon interviewed Andrew for the first time, Andrew said to him, "Well, I find it a shame that every man must carve out his own path from scratch again and again, because actually there are a few golden rules to success, and if everyone knew them, they'd find it a lot easier to become successful." And that's when he said to Napoleon, "Would you be willing to create this philosophy, to write it down?" And he actually made Napoleon at one point write down on a piece of paper. I wrote this down because it really inspired me to write down. Oh, I'll have to just open up my take a second here. But he made him write down, "I, Napoleon Hill, will meet you at the finishing post or something, and overtake you in the last sprint." In terms of life achievements. I'll just read it out because I've got it here. It said, uh, some 6 decades earlier, Carnegie issued this challenge to Napoleon: "I want you to write very slowly and take down this formula." Carnegie had said, "Here it comes. Andrew Carnegie, I'm not only going to equal your achievements in life, but I'm going to challenge you at the post and pass you at the grandstand." Napoleon had thrown down his pencil and protested it was not even remotely possible. Carnegie nodded and locked eyes with the young man. "Of course, I know you're not going to be able to do that, unless or until you believe it. But if you believe it, you will." And so then the author of the article says that, Napoleon Hill may not have accumulated hundreds of millions of dollars in the same way that Andrew Carnegie did. When he sold his company that he built up, he was worth $400 million, Andrew Carnegie, which is like $6 billion. today.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
author says, but the amount of people that Napoleon's touched with his book and his philosophy is definitely probably way more. So he says, it actually came true, and I
yeah.
just thought that was amazing.
Yeah, so it's the impact, right? It's the impact. It isn't just the money; it's the impact,
Yeah,
right? And the
exactly.
fact that he impacted so many people with his life, with his one life.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that is tremendous. That's outstanding.
yeah. Because even before he passed away, he was meeting people. Like one of the last people that he worked with, um, actually, he met him because he had read the Think and Grow Rich, and I think he talked about him in last week in one of the readings we did. Clement Stone, and this was a
Yep.
businessman who had bought Think and Grow Rich and was so impressed by it that he bought it for all of his salesmen, and his company had just gone, it had really exploded with growth. And so he had written to Napoleon to thank him, and they ended up working together and creating a kind of success classes. And I think perhaps where these lectures come from that we're about to read. And so when Napoleon had found a publisher for Think and Grow Rich, he didn't have the name for it yet,
Yeah.
and his first book was called The Laws of Success. And so the publisher at first didn't want to publish Think and Grow Rich because he thought it was too similar. And finally he agreed, but he said, look, to avoid it being too similar, we're going to call it Use Your Noodle to Get the Boodle. And that's when this whole story that we read about yesterday happened. So we have some viewers now. So hi everyone watching. I'll just put the Q&A so you can actually, if you'd like to actually come live into the Hangouts, we post the link in the Facebook group every morning. The time is going to be changing soon, so it's a bit later, and I think might catch more of the online community. Should I read then? Because you read yesterday, didn't you? Or
Yeah,
did I
yeah,
read yesterday?
that'd be great. We're starting number 2, right? Starting
Yeah,
number.
exactly. I'm quite excited to. I can't remember what's in this one, so okay, I'll just share my screen. Okay, so the lectures are Your Right to Be Rich. You can actually listen to the live version by him. These are sort of a summary of what the lecture is about. So, first of all, the first premise is that the mastermind principle is the medium through which one may procure the full benefits of the experience, the training, the education, the specialized knowledge, and influence of others as completely as if their minds were in reality one's own. Isn't that a marvelous thing to contemplate? That whatever it is that you lack in education or in knowledge or influence, you can always obtain it through somebody who has it. The exchange of knowledge is one of the greatest exchanges in the world. It's a very nice thing to engage in business where the exchange of money makes you a profit, but Napoleon would a whole lot rather exchange ideas with somebody. Thomas A. Edison was perhaps the greatest inventor the world has ever known. He was dealing all the time with many of the sciences, and yet he knew nothing at all about any of the sciences. You would say it would be impossible for a man to succeed in any undertaking unless he were educated in that field. Napoleon was astounded when he first talked to Andrew Carnegie to hear him say that he personally didn't know anything about the making or the marketing of steel. Napoleon was so astounded by that statement because at that time Andrew Carnegie was the biggest steel mogul businessman in the world that he said, well, Mr. Carnegie, what is your part in this job here? What part do you play? And he said, I'll tell you the part I play. My job is to keep the members of my mastermind alliance working in a state of perfect harmony. Napoleon said, is that all you have to do? And Carnegie said, well, have you ever tried to get any two people to agree on anything for 3 minutes in succession in your life? Napoleon said, I don't know that I have. And Carnegie said, you try it someday and see just what kind of a job it is. To get people to work together in the spirit of harmony is one of the greatest of human achievements. Then Mr. Carnegie went on to break down his mastermind group to describe each one individually, to tell what part he played. Excuse me. One was his chief chemist, one was his plant works manager, one was his legal advisor, one was a chief of his financial staff, and so on down the line. There were 20 of these men, working together whose combined education, experience, and knowledge constituted all there was known about the making and the marketing of steel at that time. Mr. Carnegie said it was unnecessary for him to know about it, since he had men all around him who did understand the making and the marketing of steel, and it was his job to keep them working together in perfect harmony. The second premise, an active alliance of two or more minds in a spirit of perfect harmony for the attainment of common objectives, stimulates each individual mind to a higher degree of courage than that which is ordinarily experienced, and prepares the way for the state of mind known as faith. When driving an automobile every so often, the battery runs down and you have to do something about it. You come out some morning, you step on the starter, and nothing happens. Napoleon knows of people who get out of bed in the morning and do the same thing. Nothing happens except they feel badly. They don't want to put on their shoes, they don't want to get dressed, they don't even want to eat breakfast. They need the batteries charged, and they have to have a source for doing it. It's a mighty fine thing if a man gets up in the morning feeling like that, and if he can have a little talk with his wife, for instance, and she's a good coordinator and she helps to charge his batteries. The chances are, when he comes home that night, he will come home with all the rabbit skins that he went out to get. The third premise, a mastermind alliance properly conducted stimulates each mind in the alliance to move with enthusiasm, personal initiative, imagination, and courage to a degree far above that which the individual experiences when moving without such an alliance. In Napoleon's own early beginning, he had a mastermind alliance of 3 people. He had an alliance with Mr. Carnegie and his stepmother. They nursed this philosophy through the stages when everybody else was laughing at Napoleon and making fun of him for undertaking to serve the richest man in the world for 20 years without any compensation. There was a whole lot of logic to what they were saying, because at that time he wasn't getting much compensation out of it, in the way of money at least. There came a time, however, when the laughing was on the other side of the fence, but that took a long time, and there was plenty of blood and tears shed before Napoleon got to a point where he could laugh back at the people who laughed at him. The relationship between Napoleon's stepmother, Mr. Carnegie, and himself enabled him to offset all this fun-making that was thrown at him by Napoleon's relatives, his friends, and everybody who knew what he was engaged in. There are times when you undertake anything above mediocrity, you're going to meet with opposition, you're going to meet with people who chide you and poke fun at you. Most of them will be right close to you, and some of them perhaps your own relatives. You need some source to which you can turn when you're going to aim above mediocrity, to get your batteries charged, and to keep them charged so that you won't quit when the going is hard, so that you won't pay attention when somebody criticizes you. Criticism falls off Napoleon's back just like water off a duck's back, or more than that, like a bullet off a rhinoceros hide. Napoleon is absolutely immune to all forms of criticism. Whether it's friendly or unfriendly makes no difference to Napoleon whatsoever. He's immune to it. He became immune because of his relationship with certain people whom he built up an immunity under his mastermind alliance. If it had not been for the relationship with his stepmother, Mr. Carnegie, he would not have been able to give this seminar, and the philosophy would not be spread all over the world, helping millions of people. Napoleon had 1,000,000 opportunities to quit, at least 1,000,000 opportunities, and every one of them were very alluring. Almost sometimes it seemed as if Napoleon was stupid if he didn't quit. He could always go back to Mr. Carnegie, and he could always go back to his stepmother, sit down and have a little chat. She would say, "Stand by your guns, you'll come out on top, I know you will." She once said, at a time when Napoleon didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, as his enemies were saying, she once said, "You're going to be the richest member of the Hill family, far and away. I know it, I can see it in the future." If you would take all of Napoleon's riches and put them together, he suspects that he has more riches than all his relatives put together for 3 generations back on both sides of the house. That's true. His stepmother could see that. She could see what he was doing. It was bound to make him rich, in reference to those higher and broader riches that you'll find when you get to where you can render service to so many people. The fourth premise, to be effective, a mastermind alliance must be active. It must be active. You can't just form an alliance with somebody and say, "Now that's it, we've got it, I've lined up with this person, that person, and the other person. We've got a mastermind alliance." It amounts to absolutely nothing until you become active. Every member of the alliance has got to step right in there and start pitching, mentally, spiritually, physically, financially, every way that is necessary. They must engage in the pursuit of a definite purpose, and they must move with perfect harmony. Do you know the difference between perfect harmony and ordinary harmony? Napoleon has had harmonious relationships with about as many people than any person living today, beyond any question of a doubt. Perfect harmony relationship is about the rarest thing in the world. Napoleon can count on the fingers of his two hands all of the people that he now knows whom he has a relationship of perfect harmony. Napoleon had a speaking acquaintance, a very nice, polite speaking acquaintance with a lot of people, but that's not perfect harmony. He has a working alliance with a lot of people, but that's not perfect harmony either. Perfect harmony consists only when your relationship to the other fella is such that if he wanted everything you had, you would willingly turn it over to him. It takes a lot of unselfishness to put yourself into that frame of mind. Mr. Carnegie stressed time and time again the importance of this relationship of perfect harmony because he said, if you don't have perfect harmony in a mastermind alliance, it's not a mastermind after all, it's just cooperation. Without this factor of harmony, the alliance may be nothing more than ordinary cooperation or friendly cooperation of effort. The mastermind gives one full access to the spiritual powers of the other members of the alliance. The feeling that you have when you begin to establish permanency in your mastermind relationship is going to be one of the most outstanding and pleasant experiences of your entire life. When you're engaged in a mastermind activity, you have so much faith that you know you can do anything that you start out to do. You have no doubts, you have no fears, you have no limitations. That's a marvelous frame of mind to be in. The sixth premise: all individual successes based upon any kind of achievement above mediocrity are attained through the mastermind principle and not by individual effort alone. Just imagine how little you can accomplish if you didn't have the cooperation of other people. Suppose that you are in a profession. Suppose that you are a dentist, a lawyer, or a doctor, and suppose that you didn't understand how to convert each one of your clients or patients into a salesman for yourself. Imagine how long it would take to build up a clientele or a following. The outstanding professional men and women understand how to make a salesperson out of every person they serve. They do it by indirection. They don't go about it directly. They do it by going the extra mile, by going out of their way to be of unusual service. They make salespeople out of all their clients. Most successes are the result of personal power, and personal power of sufficient proportions to enable one to rise above mediocrity is not possible without the application of the mastermind principle. During the first term of FDR in the White House, Napoleon had the privilege of working with him as a confidential advisor. It was Napoleon who laid out the skeleton of the propaganda plan that took the words business depression out of the headlines of the papers and substituted in business recovery. On the Black Sunday, there was a meeting at the White House and the banks were closed the following Monday morning. People were lined up in front of the banks all over the country to draw out the deposits. They were scared to death. They had lost confidence in their country, in their banks, in themselves, and everybody else. Some still had confidence in God, but didn't show much signs of it. They sat down and worked out a skeleton of a plan of procedures that created one of the most outstanding applications of the mastermind that this nation has ever seen. It was only within a matter of weeks that they had taken all that fear out of people, and only a matter of days until salesmen on their own who had run out of funds, who couldn't get money, were laughing about it and not in any way scared about it. Napoleon got very smart. When he found out what was coming, he ran down to the bank and got a $1,000 bill. He might as well have had 18 cents. Nobody could change it. It wasn't worth a nickel, not a nickel. Napoleon wasn't scared though, because he was in the same boat as everyone else was in. Something had to be done about it though, and FDR was a great leader. He had great imagination and he had great courage. They got both houses of Congress working in harmony with the president. The first time in their history that both houses of Congress, Democrats and Republicans alike, got behind the president and forgot about what their political stance happened to be. In other words, there were no Democrats, there were no Republicans. They were just Americans backing their president in everything he needed in order to stop that stampede of fear. The newspapers, radio programs, and churches gave marvelous help despite their political beliefs. It was one of the most beautiful things Napoleon has ever seen. Catholics and Protestants, Jews, Gentiles, and all the rest pulling together as Americans. It was a wonderful sight, a wonderful sight. What a wonderful thing it was. They all got behind the president. Every one of them made some kind of contribution toward re-establishing faith in the people in America. During those hectic days, there wasn't any doubt in the minds of the majority of people who didn't think that Mr. Roosevelt was the only man who could possibly have handled that chaotic condition. FDR did it because he had a mastermind alliance that was unbeatable. Okay, I might stop there, and we can take up tomorrow on page 7.
Page 7. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information in that. The one thing I might mention before we start reviewing the material, Sandy, is that right now on PBS in the United States is a program called The Roosevelts, and it's done by Ken Burns, the great man that did the Civil War. And it's really an amazing study of the Roosevelts, starting with Teddy Roosevelt all the way through Frank FDR.
Right.
Yeah, and it's quite an amazing historical perspective on the Roosevelts, you know. I recommend.
Yeah. Well, he was smart enough to accept Napoleon's offer because it was actually Napoleon who wrote to him and said, "Look, I could help you with the writing of materials to get people thinking differently about the Depression and the war." And it's funny because when he says that he had to come back from difficult situations again and again, it's really true. I didn't really realize this. I thought he had this kind of cushy lifestyle of doing
his
daily
life
job.
is a journey, right? Yeah, life is a journey. I mean, we all go through ups and downs and things like that, and it's a journey. And I find young people sometimes are too impatient. You know what I mean? I think they have to realize that enjoy the journey, and yes, you're going to have times when you've got to go through downs, and you're going to go through big ups too, right? Just enjoy it and take it on as it is. It's really. It's when you look back at your journey, you'll be amazed. And even your journey, what you've done, the work you did there in the nonprofit, and then you're doing your Zumba business yourself, all of those, you may look back and say, oh, I went through this struggle and that struggle on those. But you know what, Sandy, that's part of what brought you here, right? So think of that, right?
Yeah.
It's really a marvelous thing, right? That you're look at what you're doing now. You're helping people out of that experience.
Thank you. Yeah, it's true. It's like he says, there's something good about every bad situation.
Yes.
And Napoleon that went some really, he went, he had this period where he was becoming successful because his first book had come out, and he bought this big mansion, moved his family in, started up a success school, and then the 1929 happened, and he lost all the money and had to move out and found himself with nothing, and then started up again. But each time he just picked himself up, moved on, but this happened several, big ups and downs, and he eventually, even at one point, his second wife, his wife, and he got married, and that's when he became very rich, when he put it into a book, and he got a publisher. But then they divorced, and because of the prenuptial agreement they had, she actually got all the royalties, which I can't believe.
Wow.
From the book. And so he found himself with nothing after having spent all these years working on it. And he actually met someone who had this Clement Stoner we mentioned earlier, a businessman who'd read Think and Grow Rich and was so grateful.
Oh dear. Now it looks like we have a little connection problem here. Well, let's see.
Together and creating a...
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah, we've had some connection problems there, huh?
yeah. I suddenly realized that you were talking, and I was like, oh, because it
Yeah,
hadn't frozen, so I didn't realize. Ah, whoops.
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah, and we lost a whole bunch of what you were discussing there, you know. Um,
as yeah. Okay. Well, I was. Did you hear me say about how uh the royalties of Think and Grow Rich?
no, the last thing I heard was when you mentioned that he connected with W. Clement Stone after he had, for the second time, right, gone
Okay.
through a trough, right, in his journey, right, yeah.
Well, that was actually more like the sixth or seventh time.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
It's the
Okay.
biggest one that stuck in my mind.
Yes.
Yeah, and so, but each time it led to something.
Yeah.
Uh,
A
it's led to
different.
something new. It's maybe if he hadn't had that story, that experience with the second wife, basically
Yeah.
claiming most of the money that he'd made from the book,
Yeah.
then he wouldn't have created a third, his final kind of business,
Yeah.
which still exists today because there's the Napoleon Hill Foundation, and so it's like you said, it's a journey, and
Yeah, the takeaway is that you're on a journey, and you're not sure how it's going to unfold, right? But in your heart, you know what you're working towards, right? You know what you're working towards. It's clear that you are out to bring people's consciousness up about their life and money and all kinds of things. So that's clear. You're on that journey. That journey is clear. There are times when you're gonna, kind of say, "Oh, I could think maybe I'll change this or whatever," but
yeah.
but you know,
Yeah, that's what got me thinking yesterday after we talked about the dreams. I realized that I was putting my dream of writing a book, um, for how young people learn about money, um, on the kind of on the side, and I had this really big awareness that I should just do it. I am already writing it, but
good.
I should sort of make it, see it as a primary focus as well as what I do with my business.
Yeah.
And I got really excited about that
Oh,
and it
good.
was almost like Napoleon Hill was talking to me because that's why I started to research his life because I was I was thinking how I when someone asked us Abd yesterday, he said, "What's your dream?" And I talked about this youth financial literacy book. I was like, "Well, I never speak about this," and I was like, I need to like bring it out more into the world, and so that's what I'm going to start doing. But yeah, I think that's why it's really useful to have these kinds of conversations because you become more aware of
I do too.
the power of each time you speak about something and you focus on it. And it's like Carnegie said to Napoleon Hill, if you believe you can do it, then you will. I love that he did. Yeah.
Oh, did you get my song, by the way? I sent you.
No, no,
Oh,
I didn't.
oh,
I no, I
in
didn't log in.
Messenger.
I don't have a login for Spotify anymore. So
Oh,
um,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But what was I going to say? And just the other things that he talked about in the passage we read were the mastermind principle, having people around you that can support you and like partners in believing, like we've spoken about, and also who have knowledge about things that you might not have knowledge of. I found that really useful,
Yeah.
because it's with everything I've done personally, because we can learn everything ourselves, but if you are in a community or in a team or in a group of people that are learning the same stuff, people can fill in each other's, people fill in your gaps.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, so let's, I've got to go and walk my dog now. He's wondering what's going on, way over time, but thanks for coming on, Glenn.
Okay. And
And
everybody have a great day. It's Wednesday, midweek, right? So,
yeah, yeah, you too, and everyone watching the replay later, and back tomorrow at the same time.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, sorry about the connection problems, everyone, and have a great day. And just remember, whatever the mind can achieve, oh no, whatever the mind can conceive, you can achieve. Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.